studio emisionit opinion, si çdo të thënë, marrë mërkurë në orën 22 dhe të njëjtën në orën 21. Viti 2022 ishte viti 100 vjetorit të vendosjes marrëdhënieve diplomatike ose të instalimit parë marrëdhënieve diplomatike të Shqipërisë me Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës. Në fakt është viti i vendosjes marrëdhënieve diplomatike të Shqipërisë me fuqitë kryesore të botës, duke nisur me Britaninë e Madhe, me Italinë, Francën dhe vendet e tjera europiane që cilat ishin të parat që e njohin Shqipërinë. Por në korrik të vitit 2022, Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, nën presionin e komunitetit shqiptar në Amerikë, nën presionin e qeverisë Tiranës, që kishte dërguar një emisar të caktuar në Uashington, por dhe nën presionin e kompanive të naftës amerikane, vendosën të instalojnë marrëdhënie diplomatike me Shqipërinë. Për të bërë të mundur këto marrëdhënie diplomatike dhe për të qenë të sigurt që kishin vepruar drejt, ata patën dy kushte. E para, nëse Shqipëria do të njihej nga vendet e tjera europiane, pra vendet e rëndësishme europiane, dhe e dyta, dërguan një ambasador, pra një diplomat të rëndësishëm, i cili erdhi nga Tanxheri i Marokut, për të vërtetuar në Shqipëri për 3 muaj nëse shteti i ri shqiptar plotësonte kushtet për të qenë realisht një shtet bindës, pra që edhe me aftësi vetë qeverisë. Ky misionar, i cili mbriti dhe quhej Maxwell Blake, mbriti në Tiranë, vendosi dhe i shkruajti Uashingtonit që Shqipëria ishte e gatshme si një shtet që mund të kontrollonte veten dhe mund të vetë qeverisej. Nga ky moment u instaluan marrëdhënie diplomatike mes Shqipërisë dhe Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, marrëdhënie të cilat në 100 vjet kanë pasur plot ulje ngritje, kanë pasur shumë probleme. Ato kulmuan në vitet e mbretit Zog, po më pas u ulën sërish. Ne kemi një dokumentar i cili është përgatitur nga Ambasada Amerikane në bashkëpunim me Televizionin Klan, i cili fokuson raportet nga viti 1922 deri në vitin 1991 kur u rikthyen marrëdhëniet diplomatike, pra kur u rivendosën marrëdhëniet diplomatike mes Shqipërisë dhe Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës. Është shumë i dokumentuar, është i hollësishëm për të kuptuar kush kanë qenë personat e parë shqiptar që kanë takuar presidentët e Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, si kanë qenë raportet midis dy vendeve, si u lëvizën prapaskenat, po i quajmë për vendosjen e marrëdhënieve diplomatike, si u prishën ato, si ishin marrëdhëniet në vitet e komunizmit dhe kur filluan bisedimet e para sekrete për të riinstaluar marrëdhëniet që u rikthyen prapë në 15 mars vitin 1991. Ne do ta ndjekim këtë dokumentar që është 50 minuta, ndërkohë do rikthehemi për të biseduar për zhvillimet midis viteve 1991-2022 me dy ish-ministra të jashtëm, Marta Dade, mirëmbrëma, mirë se keni ardhur, dhe Tritan Sheu, mirëmbrëma, të dy ish-ministra të jashtëm të Republikës Shqipërisë që kanë dhe kontributin e tyre në këto marrëdhënie. Por le të ndjekim dokumentarin, i cili është një rrëfim historik, thash, i përgatitur nga Ambasada Amerikane në bashkëpunim me Televizionin Klan, është një rrëfim historik i fillimit marrëdhënieve diplomatike, nis pak më herët, deri në vitin 1991 kryesisht pra i fokusuar.
Nothing more than these images shows what really happened in the relations between our two countries. What Albanians really thought of the United States of America, even when communism considered them our main enemy. Just as this 1979 film of Nicola Caracciolo testifies.
Tirana, capitale dell'Albania. Lo spettacolo all'Istituto d'Educazione Fisica. Il presidente americano Carter e il leader sovietico Brezhnev.
Baker's visit to Tirana will certainly remain a rare moment in the rapport between the two countries.
And on behalf of President Bush and on behalf of the American people, I come today to say to you, freedom works.
It came almost 69 years after the establishment of diplomatic relations and almost 45 years after they had been frozen by communists. However, relations between the two countries date back much earlier. A simple search shows that the history of relations between Albania and the United States in fact starts much earlier than the time of establishment of relations. The first official document between the just-born Albanian state and Washington comes from January 1913, when the representative of the Vlora government in London sent a letter to the U.S. ambassador in Great Britain, seeking the recognition of the new Albanian state. The first copy of the letter has not been made public, but it is confirmed also by the first Albanian Prime Minister, Ismail Qemali. The Albanian community in the USA, which at the time was sizable and was led by two known characters who would play a part in Albania's history, must have played a role in this letter, Fan Noli and Faik Konica. The latter would become the first Albanian ambassador to Washington. Officially, the first inhabitant from the Albanian lands to arrive in the USA is Kola Kristoforiu. In 1884, he arrived in New York, registering as a citizen of the Ottoman Empire. Coming from the village of Katun, Kolonia, Koli Kristofori was followed by other Albanians. In the beginning of the year 1900, they were several thousands, had their own newspapers, tens of known associations, among which Vatra played a key role in Albania's history. It is still active today. Vatra was founded in Boston in April of 1912. It played a decisive role both in the foundation and the consolidation of the new Albanian state. In the first Albanian parliament, it has its own MP. The Albanian press in the US was also very active, above all, Deri, which is still published even 100 years after. In the beginning of the proclamation of independence, the US seemed little engaged in Europe and very little active in the Balkans. But at this time, in the west of the Ottoman Empire, the American Red Cross played a role. Likewise, a modest number of missionaries had arrived for a number of years, among which the best known was Charles Telford Erickson. He would play a key role in the establishment of diplomatic relations. Erickson had arrived in Albania in 1908 and was first settled in Korça, Elbasan, and Tirana. He learned Albanian and became a strong proponent of the independence of Albania. Likewise, a girls' school had been established in Korça, led by Miss Kennedy. She stayed in the city until after the end of World War I. Everything changed after World War I. At the end of it, the USA had been confirmed as the most important power with an active role in setting the new map after the war. Likewise, Albania had lost one of its main allies, Austro-Hungary. Recognizing the Treaty of London between Italy, Britain, and France, Albanians had only one hope for their existence: protection from the USA. To draw the attention of the U.S. about the Albanian cause, Vatra began to assume a leading role. On July 4th, 1918, Fan Noli was summoned to a meeting of nationalities living in the USA with President Wilson. He informed him about the Albanian cause. In 1919, Wilson arrived at the Peace Conference, where 6 delegations arrived, each claiming to represent Albania. In Paris, the first known meeting between the U.S. President and an official Albanian representative is confirmed. The agenda of President Wilson on April 17, 1919, features meetings with 18 foreign delegations. Aside from the Prime Minister of Serbia, the representative of Greece, that of Romania or Syria, he also received Esad Pasha as the representative of Albania.
Esad Pasha Toptani erdhi përmes mbështetjes franceze dhe arriti madje jo vetëm që të takoj autoritetet më të larta franceze në Paris, por arriti për të parë edhe presidentin e Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës Ullson. E takoi Ullsonin shumë pak, por nga që Ullsoni atë ditë ka takuar shumë delegacione, koha e takimit ishte fare e shkurtër. Dhe Sati nuk dinte as anglisht, as frëngjisht, dhe amerikanët për ta përcjell, sepse s'kishte kohë, i thanë ato gjëra që kishe për t'ia thënë presidentit Ullson, mund t'i shkruash në një copë letër edhe na i dërgo. E Sati pa shtoptani i dërgon ditën tjetër, në 18 prill, presidentit Ullson. Në Paris kishin mbetur Lansing, sekretari i shtetit, me ndihmën e tij, por ata me porositë të Ullsonit nuk morën pjesë në bisedimet për arritjen e një kompromisi tjetër që u arrit midis Francës, Britanisë dhe Italisë, në bazë të së cilit Italisë i njiheshin favore të mëdha në Shqipëri, po kështu edhe Jugosllavisë në veriun e Shqipërisë dhe Greqisë në jug. Pra, faktikisht coptoi Shqipëria. Dhe pikërisht këtu del madhështia e Ullsonit. Para se të largohej nga Parisi, madje duke qenë në anijen me të cilën po kthej në Shtetet e Bashkuara, u kujtua dhe i bën një komunikim Lansingut, sekretarit të shtetit, kam merak punë në Shqipërisit. Të lutem shumë të më kesh kujdes Shqipërinë. Dhe pastaj kur e njoftuan për memorandumin e coptimit Shqipërisë, realisht që ishte i 13 janarit 1920, ai përfundimisht u kthen përgjigjen asgjësuese vendimtare, unë nuk pranoj, unë kundërshtoj, dhe ju nuk duhet t'i zgjidhni objektivat dhe pazaret tuaja në kurisë të Shqipërisë dhe me shpenzimet e Shqipërisë.
With their borders guaranteed by the peace conference and a stunning gesture for internationals and Albanians themselves, in the Congress of Lushnja, the new government of Tirana intensified efforts and requests for recognition from the USA. Just as this interview of Prime Minister Ahmad Zog for the AP testifies. In 1920, the government of Tirana assigned Costa Chakrezi, the representative of Vatra, as its commissioner in Washington. Chakrezi began to play a very active role, and on April 7, 1920, he managed to meet Secretary of State Colby to request the recognition of Albania. The Secretary of State declared that the U.S. thought that the decision was premature, and many things would depend on the recognition by Britain and France and the performance of governance in Albania. To find a better path, the government of Tirana replaced Chakrezi with missionary Charles Erickson. Erickson had begun to bomb the American ambassador in Rome as well as the Department of State with letters.
It appears to Mr. Erickson that there are thousands of American Albanians to whom America is almost as dear as their motherland, and upon whom no other country has such a hold on their imagination and affection.
Erickson decided to use a trick. He took advantage of the great interest by American oil company Sinclair Oil in resources in Albania. Sinclair Oil began to show interest in all directions, believing that diplomatic relations would help it with its investment. Under pressure from Vatra, Erickson, Sinclair Oil, but also the Department of Commerce, the State Department decided to dispatch an observation mission to Albania. It tasked for this job the American General Counsel in Tangiers, Maxwell Blake, who was given these instructions on April 24, 1922.
The department is considering the recognition of Albania. Before taking action, it is desired that you report as to conditions in that country, stability of present government, and existing or prospective American interests there. You are instructed to proceed as soon as possible to Rome for consultation with the embassy and examination of correspondence regarding Albania. From Rome, you are instructed to proceed to such points in Albania, including Tirana, as you may consider necessary for your investigations. Department will cable you further instructions at Rome.
Diplomat Blake arrived in Tirana in May 1922, and on June 28th, he sent the State Department his first reports, very optimistic ones.
After careful consideration of all aspects of the situation, based upon information drawn from various parts of the country and from individuals of all views and religious complexion, the propriety and expediency of immediately according American recognition of Albania is respectfully recommended.
Blake's opinion appears to have been very convincing. On July 25, 1922 at 4 p.m., he received a telegram signed by the U.S. Secretary of State Hughes.
On July 28th, you may extend to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Albania written notification of the de jure recognition of Albania by the United States. In extending this recognition, you may state that the government of the United States has taken cognizance of the successful maintenance of a national Albanian government, pending legislative action by Congress to establish regular diplomatic representation. You will continue to act as Commissioner of the United States with the rank of Minister. Acknowledge receipt and confirm action taken. The fact of recognition will be given out for publication in morning papers of July 28th.
On July 28, 1922, Maxwell Blake delivered to Foreign Minister Jafer Upi a copy of the telegram from the Secretary of State. 1 hour later, he informed the Prime Minister Ahmad Zag, and at 12 o'clock, the Parliament of Albania. The recognition was accompanied in the Parliament Hall with a long ovation, while the band of Vatra, which had arrived in Albania in the meantime, performed in the streets of the capital. The news of the U.S. recognition was given the same day in American newspapers. And 1 day after, Faik Konica sent the Secretary of State this telegram in the name of Vatra.
Sir, in the name of the Albanians living in America, some of whom have fought and died in the ranks of the American Army, I beg leave to warmly thank Your Excellency for the recognition of the Albanian government by the United States. Yours respectfully, Faik Konica.
Blake finished his mission in Tirana. In October 1922, he was replaced by Plenipotentiary Ambassador Ulysses Grant Smith of Pennsylvania. Smith arrived with a small staff, and on December 4th, he presented his credentials to the High Council. The first headquarters of the embassy was placed precisely in the house of one of the members of the High Council, and a known patriot, Abdi Taptani. That is the building that still exists and is known by the name of Sarayet. However, it appears that the building of the Sarayet was not comfortable and not at all in keeping with the standard that the U.S. envisioned for its diplomats. Taking advantage of a decision of the U.S. Congress to build U.S. Embassy headquarters in the world, new Ambassador Charles Hart managed to convince the Department of State to provide about $1.6 million to build the new mission building in Tirana, over an area of about 15,000 meters squared on the hill of the road to Elbasan. The work for building the new embassy lasted for 2 years. The U.S. legation was the largest and most modern complex in Tirana of that time. It included the residence of the minister, the residence of the secretary, the chancery, garage, living quarters for service personnel, and the reception booth. For building the new complex, Hart picked a spot of the capital from where a rare view opened up. The legation complex would have an artisan well, as Tirana did not have a drinkable water pipe system. Electricity would be produced by a generator. a request of the minister was that the building have a large hall for dancing. Thus, Albania had the first ever legation built by America overseas. The legation was inaugurated with a banquet and a ball on Thanksgiving on November 27, 1930. The banquet was held in the big hall and participants included King Zog in military uniform, the entire Albanian cabinet, all foreign diplomats in Tirana, and other personalities. It was the first time the king visited a legation. U.S. Independence Day was celebrated there for the first time on July 4, 1931. The U.S. Embassy in Tirana still preserves the same look that it had on the day of its inauguration. In those years, there are many photos that are testimony to the intensity of diplomatic relations, such as these photos documenting the visits of Prime Ministers Pandali Evangeli and Mehdi Frasheri to the embassy of this lunch given by the foreign minister in honor of the departure of American Ambassador Wheeler. In response to the American decision, in February 1925, President Ahmet Zog appointed Faik Konica, one of the best-known Albanian intellectuals in Europe, as Albania's ambassador to Washington. Konica remained in that post until September 1939. In the 20s and 30s, the U.S. began to have a greater and more active presence in Albania. Besides the American Red Cross, which had a direct participation in building the Tirana Hospital, besides the Rockefeller Foundation that dealt with the fight against malaria in 1921, a vocational school was built in 1921. In 1922, Harry Foltz, someone who would play an important role in the rapport between the two countries, arrived as its principal. He built one of Albania's elite schools of the time, what is known as the American Technical School. The technical school also built the first electrical station in Tirana, which gave power to the royal palace. In 1925, Ericsson comes back to the scene. He managed to build the Golem Agricultural School through $350,000 of donations and funding. 10,000 of these had been donated by U.S. President Herbert Hoover. Both schools became a model of Western education. Official rapport between the two countries had not seen any event, at least until February 1938, when the four princesses, sisters of King Zog and members of the royal family, arrived for a visit in New York.
Battling adverse winds and tides, the Italian liner Conte di Savoia brings royal cargo to New York Harbor, the three unmarried sisters of King Zog of Albania. People are asking whether their first U.S. visit is a holiday or whether it has political significance. Our American commentator offers one answer.
It is rumored their dark eyes are on a sharp lookout for rich American husbands.
They visited not only New York and Boston, where during the service at the St. George Church, the only recording of Fan Noli and Faik Konica was done, but also Washington. The four members of the royal family were received for an informal afternoon tea by the First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, at the White House. Relations with the U.S. became even more enthusiastic in April of 1938, when King Zog declared his marriage with Geraldine de Nagy Aponi.
Hungary is very proud and happy that the future queen of noble Albanian nation is of Hungarian birth. The charming character and high qualities of a future Albanian queen is a guarantee for the happiness of the country.
I'm very touched by all the sympathy the world has shown me, and especially by my country where I was born, Hungary.
Born in Hungary, half of Geraldine's family was American. This fact became an important story in the American press. However, Geraldine did not remain in power for long. On April 7, 1939, Italy began Albania's invasion.
Today in the tiny kingdom on the Adriatic, people look out across their harbors down the muzzles of Italian guns, look into the faces of Italian soldiers, look up to masses of Italian warplanes, read leaflets in their own language, calling upon them to surrender immediately or be massacred from the air. Some reports say the Albanians resisted the invaders, but what can a nation do outnumbered 40 to 1?
On April 5, 1939, U.S. Ambassador to Tirana, Hugh Grant, officially proposed to King Zog to shelter Queen Geraldine inside the U.S. Embassy. The king appreciated it, but decided that the Queen leave Albania 24 hours after heir Princess Leka was born. The U.S. openly condemned the aggression, as shown in this report of the U.S. National Radio on April 8, 1939. This statement is accompanied with an interview with the Albanian ambassador to the U.S., Faik Konica. That is the only recording left of his voice.
The dispatches say that King Zog has left Albania.
That's very likely a matter of strategy. He will go back and lead his people in due time. Meanwhile, he naturally wants to be with his sick wife and 4-day-old baby.
The Italians say they've taken over all of the provinces. Where will your government be?
That, my dear Mr. Bokic, I would not tell you if I knew myself. Buildings do not make a government. Because it will be invisible, do not think that it will not exist. You can no more destroy my government than you can destroy the spirit of my people.
The U.S. did not agree to recognize the new government of Tirana, at least until September 1939, when relations between the two countries froze and the respective ambassadors left Tirana and Washington. World War II froze relations between the two countries, but did not entirely suspend them. In the chaos of the war, territorial claims over Albania resurfaced again. This led to a hesitation of Britain to recognize the exiled government of King Zog.
Driven from one country to another, and now just arrived in London, are King Zog of Albania with Queen Geraldine and their baby son.
Britain's hesitation gave rise again to the activity of Albanians in the U.S. In November 1942, Van Noli and Faik Konica were both summoned to the Department of State. 3 weeks after, on December 10, 1942, Secretary of State Cordell Hull read to the press this statement.
The government of the United States is not unmindful of the continued resistance of the Albanian people to the Italian forces of occupation. The effort of the various guerrilla bands operating against the common enemy in Albania is admired and appreciated. The government and people of the United States look forward to the day when effective military assistance can be given to these brave men to drive the invader from their homes. Consistent with its well-established policy not to recognize territorial conquest by force, the government of the United States has never recognized the annexation of Albania by the Italian crown.
The statement was followed by concrete acts. On November 18, 1943, an American major entered Albanian resistance groups on a mission. In this rare footage of November 1928, 1944, the day that communists entered Albania, it is easy to notice on the victory stage an American military officer. Tomi Stefan, originally from Korça, had built a great reputation among partisan forces in the days of the war. In May 1945, the American non-official civil mission arrived in Albania. It again settled in the U.S. legation and was led by Jacobs, an experienced diplomat. However, in 1945, Communist Albania had sided with Moscow for good and was ready to create problems in relations with the U.S. mission began to be isolated by the control of Sigurimi bodies as its members were followed everywhere. Just as this file from the secret police archives testifies.
Njerëzit e Departamentit Amerikan që janë më të rrezikshëm dhe që ne duhet të zbulojmë të gjitha lidhjet dhe kontaktet e tyre me shqiptarët janë: 1. Anton Stevens, të ruan kontaktet e tij me elementin katolik. 2. Harry Fools, të ruan gjithë kontaktet e tij me miqtë e vjetër. Ernest Peters, në orën 11:15 para dreke, vajti në UNRRA dhe doli në orën 12:30. Ernesti duhet të largohet sa më parë se po bëhet mjaft i rrezikshëm. Njerëzit që kanë lidhje me Departamentin Amerikan janë Kol Kuqali, Loni Adami. Të ruhet mirë se është i rrezikshëm. Anthony Stevens, në orën 2:30 të datës së djeshme, doli nga shtëpia e Kol Kuqalit. Kol Kuqali, para 1939-s, ka qenë sekretar në legatën amerikane, ku ka spekuluar mjaft në kurrizët atyre që donin të shkonin në Amerikë. Kjo provohet nga fakti se ky, para se të hynte në këtë punë, ka qenë kreti vëbekt dhe së fundmi u pasurua. 3 gra nga Departamenti Amerikan, në datën 2 prill, në orën 10 para dreke, vajtën në shtëpinë e Adam Bolliçit. Shtëpia e Adamit është bërë qendër ku vjen vazhdimisht të departamentit. Megjithëse pa punë dhe pa të ardhura, Adami bën një jetë luksoze. Nga kjo dyshohet që Adami të jetë në shërbim të departamentit.
Hoxha began to refuse meetings with American diplomats and criticized their request for free elections and a free press. The situation became even more tense when the U.S. demanded the recognition of treaties signed before the war and the rights of American companies and citizens in Albania. The situation got so heated and accusations against the U.S. became so strong that it decided that the American mission would leave Albania until different circumstances. The re-establishment of diplomatic relations was postponed without a deadline. On November 14, 1946, head of the American mission in Tirana, Henderson handed over to the French ambassador in Tirana the representation of the rights of American citizens in Albania and their protection. At 1600, General Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Manol Konomi, called Enver Hoxha to let him know that Henderson lowered the American flag at the yard of the legation in the presence of the French minister and handed the mission over to him. At 1730, it was notified that 4 cars with members of the American mission, accompanied by 2 Albanian security cars, were headed towards Durrës. At 2030, after strict screening, the American mission got on the motorboat sent by the ship waiting at international waters to take them to Naples.
Në krye të ambasadës ishte sistema e Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës. Dhe në 39 personeli po ambalazhon të gjithë materialet se do largoheshin ambasada. Edhe gjërat e rënda, gjitha që koltuke, karrige, tavolina, i të futën gjithë në bodrum poshtë. Sistemën e ambasadës, mama time e mbështolli atje dhe e futi në një qosht të bodrumit poshtë.
The communist state decided to interrupt every contact with the U.S., including those with Albanian immigrants there. Incredible propaganda began against the U.S. and Britain.
Si qenë të tërbuar, po i ndërzehen populli ton të vogël imperialistët, amerikano-inglezë, titistët, monarkofashistët dhe fashistët të rinj italianë. Por akte të tilla piraterie tregojnë dhe dobësimin e madh të reaksionit të jashtëm dhe të brendshëm, i cili është katandisur kokoshi një thele, si çdo populli jonë. Imperialista dhe trastarët bërtasin se vendi jonë që izoluar. Populli jonë, sado që i rrethuar gjeografikisht nga shtete armiq, nuk është i izoluar politikisht dhe ekonomikisht. Populli shqiptar ka miq të fortë dhe besnikë. Ai ka popujt të Bashkimit Sovjetik dhe Stalinin e Madh dhe të lavdishëm, me të cilët është lidhur ngushësisht për jetën.
more painful was what happened with those that the communists considered pro-American. The two oldest employees of the U.S. legation, Loni Adami, who had worked there since 1929 until 1946, and his brother-in-law, Kola Kuchali, were arrested and killed by torturers. Kola Kuchali had lost during the war his two sons who had sided with the communists and were executed by the Nazis. The bodies of Adami and Kuchali were never found by their family members.
Na thirrën një ditë përpara se të vdiste babaj ta shikonin baban. Ai ishte në gradën e fundit. I kishin thyer një shpatull dhe shpatulla kishte zënë krimba. Dhe kishin thyer dhe një këmbë. Unë si fëmijë kur e pash këtë pamje u tmerrova. E torturuan 8 muaj në mënyrë makabër, tortura nga më të tmerrshmet, edhe atë, edhe Kolkuqalin, të dy. Dhe kanë vdekur në 10 qershor të 47-s nga torturat, që e tmerrshme, edhe Kolkuqali dhe babaj tim. Dhe trupat të vdekur, kufomat I kanë hedhur te plerat të kelumit Tiranës, edhe I kanë mbuluar me plera. Ne nuk dim të vendin se ku janë varrosur dhe që të paktën të gjenim trupat e tyre.
In the absence of diplomatic relations, the U.S. and Britain attempted to organize the Albanian political opposition in exile. For this, they obtained the consensus of King Zog.
They wanted to make a kind of a free Albanian committee, which would be recognized by everybody like a government in exile, because most of our government in exile were dead. And my husband answered, there's one thing that a king cannot do. My kingly duties and responsibilities, I cannot give over to any kind of committee or to any kind of man. And so he was very angry. He wasn't well. And he really told me that they should leave.
In 1949, with CIA support and State Department, the Committee Free Albania was created in Paris. Mithat Frashëri was appointed as its head. However, the attempt to bring down the communist regime failed for 2 reasons. First, because Mithat Frashëri passed away unexpectedly due to a heart attack in New York. Second, because secret operations were leaked by Kim Philby to the KGB.
Got a phone call from New York City police. There's a man dead in a hotel, Lexington, here in New York. And we don't know who he is. He's got a funny password we've never seen before. And there are 2 or 3, we don't know if they're his relatives or what they are, in his room, screaming in a way, in a language we can't figure out what it is. See, but we found a slip of paper in his pocket. It has your name and the New York telephone number. So we want you to come down here right away. So I had to go down as fast as I could. I got in the room, and he was on the bed, and he was dead as he could be. The room was in absolute chaos.
Those who landed in Albania were arrested after being betrayed and became the target of communist triumphant propaganda.
U hap në Tiranë gjyqi kundër një bande spionash dhe diversantësh në shërbim të zbunimit amerikan. Populli I kryeqytetit noqi me interesim këtë proces gjyqësor. Në sallë janë vendosur armët dhe materiali teatër me të cilat ishin pajisur banda e spionëve dhe diversantëve kapur nga organet tona të sigurimit.
Para disa kohësh, organet e sigurimit të shtetit kanë kapur bandën e armatosur të diversantëve dhe spionëve të formuar jashtë shtetit nga zbulimi amerikan dhe të dërguar në Shqipëri me ajër dhe me tokë me qëllim që të organizojnë kryengritje të armatosur për rrëzimin me rrënë të pushtetit tonë popullor.
Since 1946, For almost 44 years, nothing moved in the relations between the two countries. Albanian diplomats were forbidden to meet or even shake hands with American diplomats. Albanian sports teams refused to face American ones. Exchanges between the two countries were zero. In 1973, in a public appeal, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kenneth Roche asked Albania to establish diplomatic relations between the two countries. He said the U.S. was ready whenever the Albanians' response came. The invitation was repeated a short while after, as communist leader Ramiz Alia admits.
Erdhi një propozim nga ana e Anglisë dhe Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës që të diskutohesh për vendosjen e marrëdhënieve midis vendeve tona, duke marrë shkas çështjen e floririt shqiptar që ishte bllokuar në bankat angleze pas incidentit Korfuzit. Që aty filluan bisedimet për vendosjen e marrëdhënieve diplomatike.
Alia's testimony is supported also by this report of our ambassador to Vienna, who talks about a meeting with the Norwegian ambassador. Albania's course remained unchanged even after Hoxha's death, at least until 1989, when some things began to move.
This is the Voice of America, Washington, D.C., signing off.
During this time, the Albanian service of VOA, headed by Alez Biberai, began to play a great role. Its broadcast became very popular. A few months after, Alia received American Congressman Tom Lantos and Joseph Diaguardi. In April 1990, as a result of new developments in Eastern Europe, Alia declared for the first time that he was ready to re-establish diplomatic relations with the U.S.
Zyrtarisht, vendosja e marrëdhënieve diplomatike me Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës është bërë në fillim të vitit 1991.
In September 1990, during his visit to the UN, the first of an Albanian political leader abroad in 30 years, Alia shook hands with U.S. President Bush with the mediation of Armand Hammer, an oil magnate and former acquaintance of Lenin.
Në atë pritje, presidenti Bush erdhi dhe takoi edhe delegacionet e tjera, po takoi edhe delegacionin tonë dhe mua personalisht. Unë shpreha mendimin që Shqipëria po ecën përpara, po përpiqet që të futet në rrugën e zhvillimeve demokratike. Presidenti Bush më tha që ju në rrugën tuaj do të keni mbështetjen e Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës. Kaq ishte biseda me Bushin e madh.
In December 1990, after the students' protests, the communist regime was forced to accept political pluralism and the shift to a market economy. The new opposition party, the Democratic Party, considered the United States its main ally. Its first rallies were decorated with American flags. On March 15, 1991, the official signing of the re-establishment of U.S.-Albania diplomatic relations took place in Washington. It was signed by Foreign Minister Kaplani and Acting Secretary Lawrence Eagleburger. The U.S. openly supported the new anti-communist opposition by inviting two of its leaders to the ceremony. In May 1991, a 55-year-old American diplomat called William Ryerson, who had served for many years in Germany, arrived in Tirana. He was the first diplomat after 45 years.
Well, I came for a period of 30 to 60 days, supposed to have been.
Unë shkova fillimisht për një mision 30 deri në 60 ditësh me funksionin e pranisë amerikane atje. Pas asaj që ndodhi më 2 prill në Shkodër, fillimisht unë trondita nga masakra, pastaj nga varfëria, nga pislëku, njerëz të veshur keq, të pa ushqyer mirë. Kujtoj një ushtar të ri të gjatë që ecën në bulevard dhe që kishte një pallto që nuk ishte për trupin e tij, me palën e grisur. Pash një vetë shërbim afër sheshit Skënderbej dhe mendova, ndoshta mund të shkojë të ha mëngjes. U afrova dhe ndjeva një erë të keqe. Dhe ky ishte kryeqyteti. Mendoni se si mund të ishte periferia.
What's it like out in the provinces?
settled at the Hotel Deti, Ryerson had a very special visit one day.
Unë vendosa të takonja Ryersonin, megjithëse ishte rrezikshme, sepse ishte sigurimi në fuqi, prapë dhe ishte Ramizalia. Dhe Hotel Deti ruhej nga sigurimi. Ne shqiptarët nuk lejoheshin të hynim në Hotel Deti. Megjithatë, unë vendosa, mora guximin, thash tash ka ndryshuar situata, derisa po hapet ambasada më ndryshe. U futa dhe ke holli i Hotel Detit, pash një person që më duk se duhet ishte i huaj, dhe jo ofrova, e pyeta edhe ishte Ryersoni, ambasadori Amerikan. Atëherë i thash do të një dëgjoni një histori shumë interesante dhe i tregova gjithë historinë e babait tim deri kur e vranë që vdiq. Të nesmen e mora Ryersonin me vete dhe e solla në shtëpi ke mamaja, edhe u takua mamaja, kishte bërë 3 vjet shkollë amerikane, dinte anglisht shumë mirë. U takuan dhe biseduan gjëra gjatë. Të nesmen mamaja thiri 3 shokë babait tim që kishin bërë ata shkollën teknike edhe u bësh pjesë e një mini ambasadë.
The U.S. Embassy in Tirana was reopened again on October 1st, 1991. Ryerson, now appointed U.S. ambassador, was in Washington for his confirmation. The number 2 of the embassy, Chris Hill, a diplomat who would climb the high ranks of the State Department later, raised the American flag together with the widow of Loni Adami. In the embassy basement, they found the old legation logo, which the widow of Loni Adami had wrapped to preserve.
The flag was hoisted by Andromachi Galani.
Flamuri u ngrit nga Andromachi Galani, e veja e zotit Loni Adami, i cili dikur kishte qenë përkthyes i legatës amerikane. Adami, i cili kishte mbaruar shkollën e Arifullsit, u burgos, u torturua dhe vdiq në burgjet e Hoxhës. Prandaj ne menduam se ishte diçka simbolike që flamurin ta ngrinte pikërisht ajo.
Before the opening of the embassy chancery, another climaxing event of the 100 years of bilateral relations took place in Tirana. Secretary James Baker visited Tirana.
To all the people of Albania, I send my best wishes and enduring friendship of the United States as we celebrate 100-year anniversary of our country's establishing diplomatic relations. When the United States defended Albania's independence after World War I, it launched a lasting friendship between our people, a shared love of liberty and of the values of democracy that was never broken even when the people of Albania endured decades of dictatorship. And we look to the future, the United States is going to continue to stand with Albania as you carry forward the work to fortify democratic institutions, fight corruption, strengthen the rule of law, and complete your journey to join the European Union. May our two nations continue to build all that we have accomplished together and deliver a brighter, more hopeful future for our children.
Years ago, in 1922, America and Albania lit a sacred torch, a torch of freedom and friendship. That torch has been passed down through the generations, and even during the darkest days of communism, it never stopped burning, hidden, but never allowed to be extinguished. We owe a great deal to those who came before us, Americans and Albanians alike, who kept that torch burning until the day it could be held aloft again. Behind me is the emblem that marked the U.S. legation when it opened in Albania in 1928. After the communist dictatorship forced the embassy to close, this legation seal was preserved by the family of Loni Adami, an Albanian employee of the U.S. Embassy. And like too many others who believed in friendship with America and in the freedom of the Albanian people, Mr. Adami and his colleague, Kolek Kuchali, were tortured and killed by the communist regime. Their remains have never been found, but their memories remain with us. More than that, they continue to inspire us as we look to the future. I hope you become even more convinced that the bond between our countries is special and strong, and it will endure. It is a bond that transcends any one government or leader or person. It is a bond between two peoples joined in our belief in freedom, democracy, prosperity, and justice. It is a bond that cannot be broken. I am so proud that the American people and Albanian people are able to celebrate together the 100th anniversary of the original establishment of relations, that we are able to join hands today and lift that torch of freedom and friendship higher than ever, letting it burn more brightly and warmly than ever before, to illuminate our way forward, always together. Gëzuar edhe në qënd.
Ishte ky pra dokumentari prej 50 minutash në cilin ne u fokusuam tek, thashë, përgatitur nga Ambasada Amerikane në bashkëpunim me Televizionin Klan, tek historiku i raporteve Shqipëri-SHBA deri në momentin kur sistemi ndryshoi. Ndërkohë, ne do jemi me zonjën Dallë dhe zotin Shehu në një shikim rreth 25-30 minuta të zhvillimit midis Shqipërisë dhe SHBA-s në këto 30 vite. Me njëherë mas spoteve publicitare.